Ladies and gentlemen, we're only 48 hours away from game day, so we're bringing you, since it's been the bye week, we're going to bring you Know Your Foe segment a little bit early, and bringing Mr. Bryce Kuhn of the Go Jackets 247 affiliate site talk all things Jeff Sims, Geoff Collins leaving, and potentially Brent Key being there for the long haul after the season. All that and more on today's edition of Locked On Seminoles. Let's ride.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to another edition of Locked On Seminoles. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Drake here, and today, not only do I have Dave in the stream yard, I have Mr. Bryce Kuhn of GoJackets.com, aka 247 Sports, the number one source for all your recruiting updates. Bryce, how's it going, my guy?
Going well, guys. Appreciate you having me on. I know this is a matchup that a lot of people are waiting for on both sides. So it's going to be a fun one. For better or for worse, it's going to be a fun one on Saturday.
Oh, it's going to be a great time. And folks, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is obviously where the game starts. Now, Bryce, Georgia Tech. It's been kind of an interesting season overall. I was one of the few people that actually took the odds for BetOnline for Geoff Collins to be the first ACC coach actually to be fired. So I kind of wanted to ask you overall, how has the dynamic shifted from Geoff Collins basically being fired midway in the season? And did you guys even feel that he was able to make it even towards the end of the season?
Yeah, I think, in the beginning of the year, we had a lot of conversations with folks, obviously, around the program, in the program. And if you paid attention, they made a lot of moves, with bringing in new offensive coordinator Chip Long. They made a lot of moves, really kind of overhauling the staff. So it really felt like a last-ditch effort. This was it. The 1 year, can he put it together to find some type of continuity and really, find a way to win more than 3 games in a year? I mean, that's just been the knock on him, obviously, the past couple of years. So in this scenario, we felt, okay, the beginning of the schedule's tough. Like, I think whoever created this schedule wanted Geoff Collins to be fired because it is absolutely ridiculous.
It's brutal.
What they had to go through. It was bad. So, I was in Atlanta for the opening game against Clemson. And the score, obviously, to me was really indicative. Like, Clemson struggled the first half, and then Georgia Tech kind of hung in there before we just kind of saw the talent take over in that game. Week 2, really not too impressive over an FCS school. They do get the win. And then week 3 was just – people have blocked that game out of their memory. Obviously, Ole Miss just dismantled Georgia Tech. So, it started to kind of creep in, how embarrassing it was to lose to Ole Miss by the score that you did. Not necessarily that you lost to. Ole Miss is a great program. Lane Kiffin, one of the better offensive minds in college football. But the way that you lost that game in front of your home crowd, the few that did remain, for the entirety of the game, I think that was when we started hearing the rumblings. They go on the road the next week to UCF, in a game, and I don't know if you guys got the chance to watch that one, really a winnable game. Like, it was a winnable game. Just the self-inflicted mistakes they continue to go over and over again. I think that was the theme of the Geoff Collins era, just continuous mistakes, shooting themselves in the foot. And as we know, this following Sunday, let go. And, to kind of, zero in on that question you had, I think the dynamic has changed in the sense of the team has kind of been re-energized. Like, there's just a little bit more of they're having fun, if that makes sense. They're just having fun playing football again. They've simplified a lot of things. Obviously, last Thursday's result withstanding, beating Pitt on the road, coming off of that was impressive to me. And then beating a Duke team that dismantled Miami, last weekend. It was impressive just to see the way the guys responded. I knew I'd get a little fist bump from the Florida State fans, anytime Miami goes down. So, and just with the way they responded those first 2 weeks, I was impressed. And I think we just saw them embody what Brent Key is, and it's kind of a blue-collar. I say, the old bring your lunch pail to work type of mentality. These are just a bunch of guys that are just going out there having fun and really fighting their tails off.
Yeah, Bryce, I have kind of a fascination with this Georgia Tech program. And our former co-host Max used to share this fascination, which is you guys are located in Atlanta, and you guys, you're prime in the Southeast and all this recruiting ground in Georgia near North Florida. It's hard for me to conceive of Georgia Tech not elevating itself as a program with just the pure natural resources they have around them. You guys, obviously, under Paul Johnson, developed kind of an identity as a team that was going to run the ball down your throats. You had to game plan for at least a week, if not more, and that was going to give every team in the country a problem, no matter how good they were. Obviously, failed to develop that under Geoff Collins. What exactly is Georgia Tech looking to do next? What are you looking for them to do next as they enter the next era of establishing themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, you kind of answered it there. They've got to find an identity. This team right now, and I think that, unfortunately, we'll get to predictions later. I don't think we're going to see it as much on Saturday. But right now, they're a team that plays really well defensively. Like, if you go back post Geoff Collins, what they've been able to do defensively against Pitt and Doak, and then, obviously against a Virginia team that is not really good, but Brennan Armstrong's still a talented quarterback. The things they're able to do, they've got to establish something offensively. Because as you guys know, and we all know covering college football, if your offense can't move the football, cannot sustain drives, it doesn't matter if you have the greatest defense known to man. Like, it's just, it does not matter. They're going to stay on the field for too many snaps. So, to me, going forward, honestly, they're going to have to find, I really do believe, we'll get to it, an offensive-minded, potentially, head coach, a guy that can, give them an identity, because even when you went back to Paul Johnson, now look, I'm not a fan of going back. A lot of fans want to go hire Jeff Monken from Army and just say, let's screw it, let's just go. I'm like, no, do not do that, because then you're really giving up on the aspirations of ever, getting over the hump. You're okay with the status quo. But I think you have to go with a guy that has an offensive identity that can give you something to lean on. One, for recruiting purposes, so kids that come in know exactly what they're getting into. This is what this guy does. He does it well. And they're just going to have to find something, because this is a team that's just lacked an identity over the past 4 years, and I think it has created a lot of apathy within the fan base, because it's just, you never know what you're going to get week to week, and it's sad when you do see great defensive performances go to waste, like we saw against Virginia. They played great defense, but the offense could never move the football.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a little bit similar to basically how I watched Iowa football all season long, where basically that defense is top notch, but when you have Brian Ferentz back there, basically having the same offensive, game plan as in pre-World War I. But so then, who do you? This is probably the personal part of the show. Who do you want to see kind of, actually taking the helm over at Georgia Tech? Because you've heard the Deion Sanders rumors. You've heard all these other rumors as well. Me and Dave were discussing where Dave thinks that Scott Frost redemption arc could be nice there as well. Or I thought Dan Mullen would be someone that could be very intriguing, actually, also at Georgia Tech if you were surrounded with the right staff. So who do you think, or who do you want to be the next head coach of Georgia Tech?
I'll say this real quick about the Dan Mullen, because this is something I've kind of talked about in Twitter Spaces and over on our Discord. Dan Mullen is not a bad option, but you have to surround him, like you said, with the right folks. He's already, and Florida State fans can make fun of it, he's already publicly coming out and said he doesn't really love to recruit. Right. And as you guys alluded to earlier, being in Atlanta, you have to have a person that loves to recruit. One, you could recruit that city and have a really good football team. Then you talk about the whole state. Look, talking with recruiting people, they feel like, Georgia is one of those states where you can go and find a little bit of everything. Florida, you're going to find your wide receivers, your running backs, your occasional skill position guys. California is where you go get a quarterback, it feels like. Texas is there. Georgia, you can find a lot of different things, a lot of diversity when you're in recruiting. So you have to have a guy that likes that. But specifically, kind of going back to what I was saying, to me, one of the first phone calls has to be to Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina. A guy that, one, the first thing when I say this is people say, oh, it's a gimmicky offense. Really, it's a more modern day to what Georgia Tech was running under Paul Johnson. Grayson McCall, we've seen him become, a very good college quarterback from under this offense. It's an extension of the run game with, a little bit more pass presence. I think that phone call has to be made there. I've even mentioned, a name, Alex Atkins, is a name that I think is going to get. I know, but this is going to be a guy who's going to get phone calls at some point. Well respected, has really, taken a leap. That would be a reach, I think, just from the sense of, maybe the unproven sense. But I will say this to Noles fans. At some point, Alex Atkins is going to get an interview for a Power 5 job or a Group of 5 job, and whatever school takes him, just personally, I think he's going to get a stand-up guy and a really good guy to lead their program. I think that name, going back to Dan Mullen's, another interesting one. And I'll take this time because I have not done this on any other podcast. Deion Sanders is not coming to Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Like that's just that like, and I think it's interesting because we're on a Florida State podcast and there's obviously some feelings there with the Deion Sanders stuff, but it doesn't make sense. Like you get to talk to people outside of Atlanta. Oh yeah, it's cool. It's Atlanta. He's prime time. He's with the Falcons and the Braves. It's all this cool stuff, guys. Georgia Tech really isn't Atlanta. Like I don't think we people. It's not the same thing. The academic restrictions you're going to have there, some of the financial issues that Georgia Tech has, he really couldn't do what he wants to do at a Power 5 program. And I kind of think, too, he's committed to really this HBCU program that he, kind of building these programs up. I will say this, Auburn will be one to watch for Deion Sanders because they're going to try to throw a bag at whoever they can get. So there's a couple of names, and then you're going to see other ones. You're going to see the usual. I mean, you're going to see some of those, too. With the hiring of the athletic director from Alabama, Bill O'Brien's name is going to come up. That's another one. And look, that's my exact reaction. It's like, it's just so, it's like, it's not the worst thing, but it's like, it's just meh. That's how I feel about it. But there's going to be a lot of names. And the last one I'll throw out there is Dell McGee, running backs coach at Georgia, a guy who has passed over several opportunities to leave Georgia for the right fit. And if you talk about recruiting, this is a guy who is one of the more elite recruiters in the country. The talent that Georgia's been able to bring in. Tech fans are going to have to get over the fact that it might be a guy who at one point wore the red and black. At this point, you got to find a guy that's best for your program. So we'll see kind of how it rolls, and obviously they're going to want to have a name locked in before early signing day.
Yeah, those sound like some good options. We just do not want to see Alex Atkins going anywhere. Drake, is there something you want to tell our listeners that they do want to see?
Yeah, we do not want to see him leave because I think he's going to go to the Northwestern job if Pat Fitzgerald actually us get fired. But folks, you do want to see the Sweat Block ask because Sweat Block, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a heavier set guy. Also, I'm an attorney. I wear suits and ties every day. And fun fact, I work down here in South Florida. So 95, high 80s degrees, going to court, leaving the courthouse in Miami, get the little train out. I'm sweating, and Sweat Block helps me out immensely. Sweat Block is doctor tested, doctor created, help with my own excessive sweating. And also for some of y'all out there who, sometimes, go skimp on a little bit deodorant here and there, helps block that out too. So please now go over to sweatblock.com, use promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, to get 20% off your order. Once again, promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, 20% off your order. And also at sweatblock.com, they are available on Amazon. All right, Bryce. One of the big things that basically we're waiting on to see is whether or not Jeff Sims will be available for this game. Jeff Sims had his revenge game 2 seasons ago, Mike Norvell's first game, kind of ironically because Mike Norvell did kind of basically speak to him, and then a few hours later, Jeff Sims decommitted and headed to Georgia Tech alongside Jahmyr Gibbs. So now, what are you hearing right now from practice, from camp, or if Jeff Sims is going to be available for this game? And if he isn't, how's his offense going to run on Saturday?
Well, first off, any Georgia Tech fan that just heard you say the name Jahmyr Gibbs threw up in their mouth a little bit because that's a big loss, and we're seeing what he's doing over at Alabama. Last Thursday, kind of going back to this with Sims, we saw what losing him did to this offense. The offensive line's not good. It's not a great offensive line, but having a guy back there who can do a lot of different things is going to make them look a tad bit better. And when he went out of the game, we obviously saw the effects of that. Could not move the football, 41 total yards in the second half. Like, that's video game-like numbers when you're playing on, like, all rookie. Like, that's ridiculous. With this situation, Sims, it's a lower foot, it's a foot injury, lower body injury that is, from what we believe is, and we've heard, he can't injure it any further. So there's no damage that can be done. It's just one of those things. It's a pain tolerance. So it's really how much pain can you withstand throughout the football game. And, to the average Joe, like us right here, we're saying just go out there and play. Like, take a cortisone shot, go out there. Yeah, but when you have a 275, pound outside linebacker and a 320-pound defensive lineman bearing in on you, you think a little bit differently. And so I think that in this situation, it wouldn't surprise me to see Sims play in some capacity in this game. A lot of people are leaning in on the revenge factor once again, and obviously I'm not buying into that. Like, I think that, like you said, that happened 2 years ago. I don't think that's at the forefront of Jeff Sims' mind. Maybe this game does mean a little bit more to him to go back down to Tallahassee. I'm sure he's going to have, friends and family from Jacksonville make this trip. But if we don't see him, which is, I'd say it's 50-50 right now. We know that he practiced on Wednesday in pads. That's the last padded practice of the week, if I'm not mistaken. You're going to see guys like Zach Gibson. You're going to see a guy potentially Zach Pyron, the true freshman, 3- and 4-star kind of guy, depending on which recruiting service you look at. That came out of Pinson Valley, Alabama. They really like his makeup. So it's going to be an interesting thing that maybe bodes well for Georgia Tech in the sense of, does Florida State know who's going to play quarterback? Like, you're going to have to game plan for a couple of different guys. That might be the best thing going for him into this game.
Now, when we've talked about this game previously in the season, the thing that we've worried about with Georgia Tech is that Jeff Sims can do things with his legs. And if you know anything about Florida State football over the last 15 years, it seems, we have struggled against running quarterbacks. I contended earlier this week that if Jeff Sims were to play in this game with a leg injury, that would limit his mobility. And I don't know that Jeff Sims is just going to beat you purely through the air when he's not a threat at all with his feet. Tell me about that a little bit. Do you think that Jeff Sims is capable of going out and winning a game purely on his arm with no threat to his legs, or are you better off seeing your backup at that point if you're a Georgia Tech fan?
I think you're better off seeing the backup. I really do, because what makes him so dynamic is the ability to run the football. He's not your five-step drop and let's sling it all over the yard type of quarterback. He definitely has a great arm. He's got good arm talent, but at this point in his career, as he is a polished passer, he needs to be able to win games like that. I don't think we've seen it yet. I'm not saying he can't. Look, when this kid came out of high school, I think we all thought the potential, Florida State fans, because he was obviously committed there, and Georgia Tech fans, he had the potential to be, one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC by the time he got done with his career. It hasn't come to fruition. I think that they're going to have to, for the best chance to win, you're going to have to game plan and scheme for whether it's Zach Gibson or Zach Pyron, either those two guys, because last week they didn't run Jeff Sims at all. Like, there was no designed runs from what we saw in the first two games under Brent Key and Chip Long. It was obviously a missing component, and then when you come to find out he was playing a little bit injured, it's one of those things that, kind of stands out and says, hey, that's one of the big reasons why their offense worked so well, the threat of him running. So if they want a chance on Saturday, I think you're better off suited playing a guy that's 100%, and hopefully, God willing, you've schemed something up for him. If not, it's going to be a long day.
So then, who are going to be the if it is Zach Gibson or Zach Pyron basically starting up? Who are going to be the complementary pieces in this offense? I've seen that Hassan Hall hasn't doing particularly well in the out of the backfield, not replacing, but limiting the amount of Jameer Gibbs at kind of his departure. Also have Malachi Carter on the outside, a wide receiver. So who are going to be the complementary pieces that we need to look out for on Saturday that will be helping out the quarterback?
Yeah, Hassan Hall is going to be one of them. I mean, the ACC is very familiar with what he did in his time at Louisville, as an electric return guy, kind of a gadget player that settled into a nice little role in Chip Long's offense. Dante Smith, you're going to see that tandem a lot. So it's going to be Hall and Dante Smith that come out of the backfield. I think those two are going to be there. And then obviously Carter's a big piece. He's been a little bit banged up, hasn't been 100% over the past couple of weeks. So that opens the door for a guy like Nate McCollum, who is a kind of a speedy slot receiver that has been a favorite target of Jeff Sims. But I think a lot of it determines is what is the chemistry like between Zach Gibson and some of these other weapons. So then you start to look to some of the second-team guys that have taken a step up. Leo Blackburn, who is a 4-star receiver coming out, sustained an ACL injury 2 seasons ago, is finally healthy, had a big game against Duke. Was still a little sore coming into the Virginia game. Is he an option? Malik Rutherford, Ryan King. Some of these other options are going to have to get involved. And then look out for tight end Dylan Leonard, because as you guys know, for a young quarterback, the best friend's a tight end. That's the safety blanket. That's what you can check down to. So it's going to have to be by committee, but I think it starts with the two guys in the backfield, Dante Smith and Hassan Hall, who can make plays in the running game and the passing game.
Yeah, last question I'll ask then about the offense, and I think we'll flip over to the defense. Bryce, I need you to tell me about this offensive line, because I know a lot of people don't like PFF. I go on there just to look at the offensive and defensive line numbers. I thought it was a typo when I saw Georgia
Mm.
Tech's pass blocking. And the run blocking isn't great either. What the hell is going on with this offensive line of Georgia Tech?
You just echoed what the fans have been saying for the past 3 years. I mean, this is a group that is. I'll say this, and then we'll go into it. It's a group that was heavily overhauled by the transfer portal. So you had a pair of guards that came in, Pierce Quick and Paul Tacho from Clemson, and then Quick was from Alabama, had never played together. Your left tackle is Corey Robinson, a transfer from Kansas. Your starting right guard right now is a guy named Joe Fusel, who the staff loves his mental makeup. Guys, he's a walk-on. Like, he's a walk-on. And there's no disrespect to, walk-ons, the journey they go through, but it's not sustainable. When you're playing against Power 5 level competition day in, day out, it's very rare to see a guy hold his own consistently throughout a season. So your only returning guys that had playing time was two-year starter Jordan Williams, who's been a solid contributor at the right tackle position, and then Weston Franklin. This group has just never gelled. They don't, to me, they don't all look comfortable still playing with one another. And I think that's a big problem when you're sitting at week 8, week 9 in a season. You can't have that. So with the situation coming into this football game, I've told people you have to judge this team differently. And so the PFF numbers are obviously, and I'm with you. Some things I love, some things I don't love about PFF. I think they don't grasp everything necessarily, but there's definitely some good stuff you can pull. You have to evaluate this team post-Brent Key. So what have they done since then? Well, in the Pitt and the Duke game, they ran the ball effectively, guys. I mean, they were getting a great push up front. And then against Virginia, who I think was rated the worst defensive front in the run defense in the ACC at the time, and that might be wrong, fact check me on that, but one of the worst, they couldn't do anything. And so it's been this hot and cold thing. They're not consistent. So going to a game like this where, I don't think you offensively have the ability to keep up. If Florida State starts to get into they start scoring and you have to match them, I don't think you can do that. So in a game where you want to control the game on the ground, it's just anyone's guess. I mean, it's kind of like, roll the 8 ball over and let's see what it says of how the offensive line is going to play today. I mean, it's not been an inspiring group, and I think it's also been one thing that's kind of been be a caveat of if Brent Key were to get this job, the one thing that people could say negatively is the offensive line has not had any growth in the past 4 years.
All right, Dave, Bryce, we're now at the end of the show, but now let's talk over to my favorite side of the ball, which is the defense. Bryce, Georgia Tech was kind of one of the, I guess, more poor units last year defensively on that side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
This year, though, it's kind of a little bit, it's different. I think, you're third in the ACC in interceptions, top half of the league in passing defense as well. What do you owe this turnaround on the defensive side of the ball for Georgia Tech?
Two things. Better interior defensive line play. The defensive tackles have played way better this year, getting pressure up the middle, forcing quarterbacks into uncomfortable situations, and a way better back end. Coming into the season, the national narrative was they lost Tariq Carpenter, Wanye Thomas, Trey Swilling. They have all, gone on to practice squads or NFL rosters. And sometimes I feel like they have had addition by subtraction. They've got some guys back there that are probably more talented than the guys they had last year that are playing very well. And a guy that I want to name and give a shout out to is Lamiles Brooks. He scored the only touchdown of the game. He has been all over the field the past 3 weeks, starting at the safety position. He's played fantastic. Zamari Walton, Miles Sims, those guys playing on the corners have, graded out fairly well as well. So it's a group that has just played more solid and limiting big-time plays. There haven't been a lot of explosive plays. I'll knock on wood because it'll probably happen in this game when I say that. There haven't been a lot of explosive plays through the air against this defense. And, I remember the Virginia Tech game last season, I think there were 6 plays of 20 yards or more through the air just in the second half. And so you start to take into account all these things, not allowing the big play to happen. They're still getting beat sometimes on some things, but I just think those two things right there, better interior line play. And then obviously the linebackers and who they are. AC Lee's been fantastic this season. Charlie Thomas is a really good weapon to have. But the back end of the defense is where we really needed to see improvement, and they have so far.
Yeah, so among that defense, which has surprised, I think, a lot of people, it's around top 50 to 60-ish overall in the country, which is a market improvement. Tell me two things. One, who exactly we should be looking out for in this game on that defense? And two, what specifically about Florida State's offense worries you in light of how this defense has performed for Georgia Tech?
Keon White, defensive end. He's first year really in the program healthy. He transferred in from Old Dominion. This guy,
That kid's
yeah, he's huge. Like, okay, so I don't want to get on a tangent here, but this guy and Keon White. So I remember in fall camp, okay, so I'm 5'10". Like I am this 5'10" guy out there on the practice field, and he comes off this a massive human being. Like you just see him, you're like, the fact that we are the same species makes no sense because he is huge and how quick he is and how fast he is. So he's going to be a guy that you got to watch. Kyle Kennard on the other side, kind of a rush edge. There's going to be a guy they're going to want to create pressure. That's one thing that Andrew Thacker, since Geoff Collins has, obviously been let go, Thacker's had more control, and he's dialing up blitzes at a high rate, and he's trying to create a lot of confusion to help out different parts of the defense. So those two guys on the end we're going to have to watch. Charlie Thomas at the linebacker position can do a little bit of everything. He is a high-risk, high-reward type of player. He plays that weak side linebacker position. He's not necessarily the biggest guy. I mean, he's not going to, run fit every time as a defensive guy, but man, what he can do, in pass defense and, tracking a guy down from sideline to sideline is really good. And, I think the problem for me when I look at this game, and I've got, our podcast preview coming out Friday morning for this, the problem for me in this is Jordan Travis and the passing attack and some of the receivers. Georgia Tech hasn't, that was a question I think a lot of people had about Florida State coming this season. What would the receiving group look like? It's kind of a lot of unproven guys. What would they look like? Would they gel? I'm nervous about that because while the secondary has played well, you look at who they've played, and it's not necessarily talent against that you're like, man, they really showed up against a really, really talented receiving core or a really, really talented quarterback. And they're about to enter into a stretch of games to finish out the year where you're going to have some talented quarterbacks, and I think Travis is one of those guys, obviously, that also has some receivers that are some serious weapons, and it's not just one guy that you can focus on. So how these guys line up in one-on-one battles. Look, you said earlier you're a defensive guy. I love watching the one-on-one battles, DBs against receivers, because that's a little bit of sense of pride thing, and it's a little bit of sense you get to take back to the locker room. You get to, have those fun interactions with your teammates. I think Georgia Tech's going to have to win some one-on-one battles, and I'm not necessarily comfortable with them doing that right now. And I think that could mean it could get ugly. And like what I talked about earlier, that could be something where we see some of those big plays that haven't happened so far in this season.
Is that a size thing or a talent thing, you think, when it comes to basically, or be physically in you, or is that just like scheme-wise, like you're just not built for that right now?
A little bit of both. I think that's, size-wise, you see guys like, for example, Samari Walton is long, but he's not necessarily the most physical guy. Miles Sims, he has the moniker, he's kind of like a pit bull out there. Like he's a really, likes to get up in people's faces, likes to play physical, but he's not the biggest guy. And so,
Like a Pittman. There you go.
Exactly. So it's one of those things that I think they're not necessarily built for. I'll tell you this, the best, and this goes back, and he's been battling some injuries, and you guys are familiar with his father, Kenyatta Watson Jr., the second. Kenyatta Watson Sr., obviously director of scouting at Florida State, in his time there, but Kenyatta Watson the second is the best, is the most talented cover corner on the roster. You sit at practices, you see NFL scouts have said this, 6'3", he has that link, 6'3", 195, that's what he's playing at right now. I think they're going to have to use him in this game to match up against some of the, obviously bigger guys that you have at a receiver, and it's going to be an interesting battle. That's what I'll keep my eye on, kind of the defensive backfield. How can they hold up?
That's the kid actually really, because I think we went to Grayson High School, in that higher class of it was him, Owen Popoe. I forgot the other kid's name too as well. He went to Texas, transferred over to Georgia Tech, and obviously when Kenyatta left, I was like, okay, you're going to be with your son. I can totally understand that from you being from the area. So then, what exactly, if FSU's scouting this defense for Georgia Tech, what exactly, seeing from the previous, I think, 6 games being played, what exactly do you think FSU needs to kind of harp on in order to exploit your weakness on the defense?
I haven't watched a ton of FSU. Obviously in every single game, watched the opening game of the year. I have watched a couple of the games along the way. And you guys can probably attest this a little bit more. To me, if I'm scheming against Georgia Tech, I'm going to have to spread them out. Create one-on-one opportunities, whether it's Travis by himself and 5 receivers out, whether it's creating a matchup with a running back up against a linebacker, creating one-on-one opportunities and saying, I think my athletes are better than yours, and kind of seeing how that goes. This is going to be something that Georgia Tech has not been tested like that. Against Duke, they were able to load the box, and they had success with that. So I don't think they're going to be able to do that in this game. I think Florida State's pretty and I might be hyping Florida State up a little bit more than you guys or the fans do, but I do think this is a talented Seminole team, and I've tried to let fans know that I think they've kind of had a tough stretch of games the past couple of weeks, but I still think this is a much improved team, and I think they've got some talent, and if you're not careful, this game could really get ugly if you don't stay disciplined and win those one-on-one battles.
Yeah, Bryce, this has been incredible information that I did not know about this Georgia Tech team, so thank you so much for all of that. Drake, have we reached that time of the show where we ask the big question?
Of course we do. Dave, since you kind of set it up so you for yourself perfectly, slam it on home.
Bryce, who's going to win this game? But more importantly, Drake, what do our friends at BetOnline have the spread at?
Ooh, last time I checked, I think it was 22.5, but let me double check while Bryce gives his answer.
Right.
So I've been paying a lot of attention to this line. If Jeff Sims plays, I think Tech covers the points. I really do. If he doesn't play, I think Florida State does. I think, this is a game where a lot of the guys that played 2 years ago are going to get the bad taste out of their mouth if you're a Seminole player from losing to Georgia Tech in Mike Norvell's first game. But I got Florida State winning this game. Do you want an actual score prediction?
Please. I love it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not even going to be close because I've not been right on any of my score predictions all season long, except for the Tech Pitt game. But I got Florida State winning this one 27-6. I just don't think – I have no confidence, and this is the thing. Yeah, the big eyes there. I just don't have a lot of confidence in Georgia Tech's ability to move the football without Jeff Sims. They haven't shown that, and it's kind of a prove me type of attitude, like go out there and prove it. And I think the longer the game goes on, I think it could be close up until halftime. But like I said earlier, to me, Florida State's offense is eventually going to wear down the Tech defense. That's going to have to play a lot of snaps if that offense for Georgia Tech cannot be consistent.
I almost feel like there's a small part of Drake that needs Georgia Tech to score more than 6 so he can keep his fire Adam Fuller, our defensive coordinator, narrative going. But yeah, we'll take 26.
He completely regrets inviting me on the podcast now. I understand.
Yeah, I'm about to say because right now the line actually is at 24 now. Actually, so probably they think Zach Gibson's probably going to be the one starting overall. Over is a 47.5. To me, my opinion on this game is that if Georgia Tech even sniffs close to 14 points, I need some of the defensive stuff, whether it be a coach, an analyst, a water boy. I need them gone. But Bryce, thank you so much for your time and everything else coming on here because I know you have a busy schedule, but we love giving the folks the Know Your Foe segment. Basically, we love learning about other people's teams. So Bryce, please tell the folks where they can follow you and I'll follow all your work.
Yeah, of course. You see my Twitter handle right down there if you're listening as well, at Bryce_Coon on Twitter. And then you can follow us. I don't know, Seminole fans may want to follow us. We got a lot of recruiting battles we're probably going to have with you guys as we get closer to signing day. And at the Hive GT, GoJackets.com. It's the 24/7 Sports affiliate. And I'm a little biased. I think 24/7 Sports does a fantastic job recruiting rankings. With their composite ranking, it's a great system, and appreciate the Locked On Network as well. It's a great network, and you guys do a fantastic job. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk this game. And who knows? The Tech fans after that prediction probably will write me off. So we'll see what happens.
All right, Dave, take us home, my guy.
All right, everybody. You know where to find the podcast. Anywhere you can find your podcast: Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google Play. Please like the video if you like the video, which I think you should. Subscribe to the channel, ding the little bell at the top. It'll turn on your notifications, and leave us comments. Tell us your score prediction. Who's going to win this game and why? Should Florida State be scared? The answer is no, I don't think so. But tell us anyways, and we love you for being here.
And we're saying this all before the revenge game because I know for a damn fact Jeff Sims will be playing, and he, for some reason, rushed for 115 yards as is tradition. I know, I'm sorry. But Bryce, thank you so much for coming on. Please, folks, subscribe to all the stuff. Follow him. And for Drake, That was Dave. That was Bryce. And we'll see y'all next time on Locked on Seminoles. Beat the Hive.